In a small town where wealth often decided worth, a young pregnant woman walked into a hospital clutching her stomach in pain, hope trembling in her eyes. But instead of compassion, she was met with cold refusal. The doctor, unmoved, turned her away simply because she had no money. Humiliated, broken, and desperate, she stumbled into the night. Yet, what happened next would not only change her life forever, but also transform the very heart of the man who denied her help. Comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, like, and share, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. It was a humid evening when Ayesha pressed her hand against the curve of her stomach, feeling the baby kick restlessly inside her. She was only 22, yet the lines of hardship on her face told the story of someone much older. Life had never been gentle to her. Born into poverty, she had learned early that survival meant sacrifice. Her husband, Imran, worked long shifts as a daily wage laborer, often returning home with barely enough money for food. But Ayesha never complained. For her, love and faith were stronger than hunger. The baby she carried was their hope, a tiny life that gave meaning to the pain, the sleepless nights, and the endless struggles. Each time she felt the soft flutter inside her, she whispered prayers into the silence, imagining a future where her child would never face the same indignities she had endured. But dreams are fragile in a world that values wealth above humanity. And Ayesha was about to discover just how cruel that world could be. That evening, her labor pains began earlier than expected. She tried to remain calm, breathing as her mother had once taught her, but the contractions grew sharper, tearing through her body with waves of agony. Imran rushed to her side, his face pale with panic. "Ayesha, we must get you to the hospital," he said, his voice trembling. He knew they didn't have enough money, but what choice did they have? His wife's life and their babies was at stake. They borrowed an old rickshaw from a neighbor, rattling down the broken streets toward the government hospital. The night air smelled of dust and sweat, and each bump in the road made Ayesha cry out in pain. Imran gripped her hand tightly, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. When they arrived, Ayesha could barely stand. Imran helped her inside, his heart pounding with desperation. The waiting room was crowded, filled with patients groaning on benches, mothers clutching sick children, and old men coughing into worn handkerchiefs. Fluorescent lights flickered above, casting a sickly glow over the peeling walls. At the reception desk sat a nurse, her expression bored, as though suffering was nothing more than routine paperwork. Imran begged for help, explaining that his wife was in labor. The nurse looked them up and down, her eyes narrowing at their worn clothes and calloused hands. She scribbled something half-heartedly, then directed them to the maternity ward. Ayesha's contractions were coming faster now. She leaned heavily on Imran as they pushed through the corridor, past rows of patients lying on stretchers. The hospital smelled of antiseptic, sweat, and something darker, the scent of hopelessness. Finally, they reached the doctor's office. Inside sat Dr. Kamal, a man in his early 50s with neatly combed hair and an air of authority that clung to him like his expensive cologne. His reputation was known throughout the town, not for kindness, but for his strict, unyielding rules. He believed healthcare was a privilege, not a right, and those who could not pay did not deserve his time. Imran pleaded, his voice breaking. "Dr. Sahib, please, my wife is in labor. She needs your help." Dr. Kamal barely looked up from his papers. "Payment first," he said coldly. "You know the rules. No money, no treatment." Ayesha whimpered in the background, clutching her stomach as another contraction racked her body. Tears streamed down her face, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation of being treated as less than human in the moment she needed compassion the most. "Please," Imran begged again, dropping to his knees. "We don't have the money now, but I will find a way. I will work day and night. Just save my wife and child." But the doctor's expression remained unmoved. "Take her elsewhere. This is not a charity." The words hit Imran like a slap. Rage, despair, and helplessness flooded him all at once. He wanted to scream, to curse, to fight, but he couldn't, because right now, his wife's life was slipping away in front of him. Ayesha tugged weakly at his sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. Imran, let's go. We'll find another way. And so, under the indifferent gaze of the doctor, they turned and stumbled back into the night. The world outside felt colder, harsher. The streets were empty except for stray dogs prowling near garbage heaps. Ayesha could barely walk now, her strength draining with each step. Imran supported her, his heart shattering with every cry that escaped her lips. Hold on, Ayesha, he murmured. I'll find someone who will help. I promise. But deep down, he wondered, would anyone help the poor? Or was compassion just another thing sold to the highest bidder? The tiny newborn lay in Imran's trembling arms, his cries weak, his breath shallow like whispers fading in the wind. Each rise and fall of the fragile chest was a battle, and Imran's own heartbeat thundered with fear. He felt as if he was holding both life and death in his hands. Around him, the hospital staff moved like shadows, indifferent to the storm that was tearing his world apart. Please, he begged again, his voice raw from crying. He is innocent. He has not even seen the world. Don't punish him for our poverty. But the nurse avoided his eyes, shuffling papers as though her silence could erase his pain. Security guards shifted uncomfortably, but none stepped forward. They had heard cries like this before, and in a place where money ruled, compassion had long grown silent. Imran sank to the floor, clutching the baby close to his chest. He could feel the warmth slipping, the life dimming. For a terrifying moment, he thought the child had stopped breathing. His soul cracked in half, and he wailed in agony. Ayesha's voice echoed in his memory, weak but full of faith. Don't let him die. Imran, don't let him die. Something ignited within him. He would not allow the world to steal his child without a fight. He stood, trembling, and stormed toward the doctor's office. Bursting through the door, he placed the baby on the desk in front of Dr. Kamal. The doctor looked up, frowning. What is this nonsense? Imran's voice shook with desperation, but there was fire in his eyes. You swore an oath to save lives. Look at him. He is fighting for every breath. If you have even a shred of humanity left, save him. For the first time, Dr. Kamal hesitated. The baby's faint whimpers pierced through the walls he had built around himself over decades of arrogance. His hands hovered uncertainly over the child, but then he drew back, hardening his expression. I cannot treat him without payment. Rules are rules. Imran's knees buckled, but he caught himself. His tears streamed freely, but his voice grew steady, carrying the weight of a father's love. Then let it be written that you let a child die because of money. Let every cry of pain, every breath he couldn't take, haunt you until your last day. The room fell silent. Even the nurse at the doorway covered her mouth, her eyes wet. The guards shifted uneasily. Something about Imran's words cut deeper than any accusation. The baby gave a small gasp, his body trembling as though he was pleading for mercy himself. And in that moment, something cracked in Dr. Kamal's heart. He saw not a beggar's child, but human life slipping away before his very eyes. Memories he had buried long ago came rushing back. His own daughter, once frail and ill, whom he had almost lost. The terror, the helplessness, the desperate prayers. He had been on the other side once. He had forgotten. His hands trembled as he picked up the child. Bring me oxygen. Now, he barked, his voice sharp, but no longer cold. The nurse rushed to obey, startled by the sudden change. For the first time, urgency filled the ward. Not for a wealthy patient, not for someone with influence, but for the poor man's child. Imran collapsed into a chair, sobbing in relief. His heart pounded as he watched the doctor work, placing the oxygen mask gently over the baby's face, checking his heartbeat, his breathing. The fragile cries grew stronger, steadier. Life was clinging, refusing to let go. Come on, little one, Dr. Kamal muttered under his breath. Fight. Hours blurred into one another. The baby was placed in the neonatal ward, fragile but alive. Imran sat outside, his hands clasped in prayer, whispering verses until his lips went numb. He thought of Ayesha, still weak and bleeding at home, unaware of the battle her child was fighting. He longed to run to her, to tell her the baby lived, but he dared not leave his son's side. As dawn broke, the cries of the newborn grew louder, stronger. Imran wept openly, clutching the edge of the cot. His child, his miracle, was alive. When Dr. Kamal finally stepped out, his expression was weary, but different. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by something heavier, shame. He will live, the doctor said quietly. Imran dropped to the floor in gratitude, his forehead touching the ground. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Ya Allah. But the doctor did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the tiny life inside. In that frail child's breath, he had seen his own sins laid bare, the countless lives he had turned away, the suffering he had ignored. For years, he had measured worth in currency, not humanity. But this baby, born into poverty, had become the mirror to his soul. The climax had arrived, not just for Imran and Ayesha, but for the doctor who now faced the heaviest judgment of all, his conscience. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the hospital windows, casting pale gold on the sterile white walls. Imran sat slumped against a bench, his head bowed, his hands clasped together in restless prayer. The cries of his newborn echoed faintly down the hall. Louder now, stronger but still fragile. Each sound was both a relief and a reminder. Life was still clinging, but not yet secure. Dr. Kamal stood silently near the nursery, watching the tiny chest rise and fall beneath the oxygen tube. He should have felt relief at saving another patient, but instead, he felt an unfamiliar heaviness pressing against his chest. The father's words haunted him. Let it be written that you let a child die because of money. Those words clawed at the walls he had built over decades. For years, he had convinced himself that rules were rules, that without money, no system could survive. But staring at the frail child who had fought his way into life against all odds, Dr. Kamal realized the truth. The rules he had followed had stripped him of his humanity. Meanwhile, miles away in their small home, Ayesha lay pale and trembling on the thin mattress. The old midwife sat beside her, spooning sips of warm water to her cracked lips. Every few minutes, Ayesha asked the same question, her voice weak but desperate. Is my baby alive? As Imran returned, the midwife could only shake her head, offering small comforts she did not herself believe. Your husband will come soon, child. Have faith. But hours stretched, and fear gnawed at Ayesha's soul. Her body ached, her heart pounded with anxiety. She clutched at the cloth near her chest, whispering prayers, begging Allah for mercy. Back at the hospital, Imran's eyes burned with exhaustion. He had not eaten, not slept. His entire being was tethered to the tiny crib where his son lay. Every beep of the monitor, every flicker of the baby's eyelids sent his emotions spiraling between terror and hope. Finally, he found the courage to approach the doctor again. Dr. Sahib, he said softly, my wife, she is still at home. She doesn't know what has happened. She doesn't know he is alive. Dr. Kamal looked at him, seeing not a beggar, but a father carrying the weight of two lives. Something shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed of his own comforts, his clean home, his warm meals, when this man had nothing but still carried faith. Go to her, the doctor said quietly. I will watch over your son. Imran's eyes widened. You will. The doctor nodded, his gaze fixed on the baby. He is in my care now. I will not let him slip away. Imran broke into tears, gratitude spilling from his heart. He touched the doctor's hand, the same hand that had once turned him away. Allah will reward you. You don't know what this means. And with that, he ran home, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope. When Ayesha saw him burst through the door, her weak body tried to rise, but she collapsed back onto the bed. Imran, the baby? He fell to his knees beside her, clutching her hands. His tears poured freely as he whispered, He lives, Ayesha, he lives. The doctor is taking care of him. Her sobs shook her frail body. Relief, joy, and exhaustion consumed her all at once. She clung to Imran, whispering thanks to God again and again. Alhamdulillah, my baby lives. But joy was quickly tempered by fear. Will he survive? She asked, her voice trembling. Imran cupped her face gently. He is fighting. Our son is a fighter. He will not give up. Back at the hospital, Dr. Kamal found himself unable to step away from a child. Each small breath, each tiny cry pierced through the layers of his pride. He remembered his daughter, years ago, lying in a similar crib, tubes connected to her fragile body. He remembered the helplessness, the endless prayers. And he remembered how a kind doctor, not himself, had bent the rules to save her. That act of mercy had given him years of joy with his daughter. And yet he had forgotten, allowing arrogance to harden his soul. Now, faced with this child, he saw his past reflected clearly. The escalation came like a storm. The baby's condition suddenly worsened. His breaths grew shallow again, his body trembling as monitors beeped frantically. Nurses rushed forward, panic in their eyes. Dr. Kamal's heart lurched. Without thinking, he shouted orders. Prepare the incubator. Give me the neonatal kit. His voice carried urgency, not authority. The urgency of a man who knew he could not let this child slip away. He worked tirelessly, sweat dripping from his brow, his hands trembling not with age, but with emotion. Every second felt like a battle against death itself. Nurses exchanged glances. This was not the cold, distant doctor they knew. This was a man fighting with his whole soul. Minutes dragged into eternity, but finally, the baby let out a strong, piercing cry that echoed through the ward. Relief crashed over everyone like a wave. Nurses exhaled, wiping their foreheads. Dr. Kamal closed his eyes, whispering a prayer under his breath. And in that moment, he knew this child had saved him as much as he had saved the child. When Imran and Ayesha arrived the next day, the doctor met them himself. His eyes were no longer cold, his tone no longer distant. He guided them to the nursery, where their baby lay stronger, breathing steadily. Your son is alive because he chose to fight, the doctor said softly, and because you never gave up on him. Ayesha wept openly, her body weak, but her spirit soaring. She reached out, touching the incubator glass with trembling fingers. My son, Imran bowed his head, his tears falling freely. We owe you everything. But Dr. Kamal shook his head. No, I owe him everything, and I owe you an apology. The couple looked at him in shock. Doctors in their world never apologized to the poor. But here he stood, humbled, transformed, broken in all the right ways. This child has reminded me what it means to be human, Dr. Kamal continued. I had forgotten. I turned you away when you needed me most. I will carry that shame forever. But if you allow me, I want to care for him, not just as a doctor, but as a man who has been given a second chance. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Ayesha whispered, Allah uses the smallest of lives to change the hardest of hearts. And in that truth, the escalation reached its peak. The baby who had entered the world unwanted, unloved by those in power, had become the very force of transformation. For days, the small hospital room became the center of Imran and Ayesha's world. Their baby, whom they named Aman, peace, lay swaddled in soft cloth, breathing more steadily with each sunrise. Every tiny cry felt like music to their ears, every small movement proof that their prayers had been answered. Ayesha, though still weak, insisted on sitting beside the crib whenever she was allowed. She traced her finger gently over the glass of the incubator, whispering lullabies that her mother once sang to her. Imran hovered nearby, torn between watching his wife's fragile strength and his son's fragile life, but never leaving either alone. And to everyone's surprise, Dr. Kamal remained close, often checking on Aman himself, not leaving the task entirely to the nurses. His once stern and hurried footsteps softened when he entered the nursery. He would pause, staring at the child as though searching for something beyond the medical charts, searching for redemption. The staff noticed the change. This was not the doctor they had worked with for years, the one who barked orders and dismissed the poor with a wave of his hand. This was a man who lingered at a patient's side, who listened when a mother asked questions, who even smiled softly when the baby gripped his finger. Imran observed this transformation with cautious eyes. He remembered too clearly the night he had been turned away, the words that had nearly cost his wife and child their lives. Part of him burned with anger still. How could a man so powerful, so privileged, have shown such cruelty? And yet, another part of him saw the truth unfolding before him. People could change, even the hardest of hearts. One evening, when the baby had finally been declared stable enough to breathe without assistance, Dr. Kamal called the couple into his office. His usually immaculate desk was cluttered with papers, but his eyes were clear, focused, and filled with something Imran hadn't expected: humility. "Your son is a miracle," he began softly, "but not only because he survived. He is a miracle because he reminded me of something I lost long ago." Ayesha leaned forward, her voice trembling but steady. "What did you lose, Dr. Sahib?" He exhaled slowly, as though letting go of years of buried guilt. Compassion. His gaze dropped to his hands, once so steady, now trembling slightly. "Years ago, my daughter was gravely ill. I sat in a hospital, just like this one, begging for help, praying that someone would see her as more than just a patient. And a kind doctor broke every rule to save her life. She lived because of mercy, not money. But as the years passed, I forgot. I became what I once despised. I let greed, pride, and coldness rule me." Imran and Ayesha exchanged a glance. Neither spoke, but the weight of his confession settled deeply in the room. Dr. Kamal continued, his voice thick with emotion. "When I saw your child gasping for breath, I saw my daughter all over again. And I realized I cannot undo the harm I have caused to others, but I can change the man I am today." Silence stretched. Then Imran, his voice still hoarse from sleepless nights, whispered, "You saved him. That is enough." But Dr. Kamal shook his head firmly. "No, it is not enough. I turned you away when you needed me most. That sin will remain with me, but I will not let it define my future. I want to make amends." He reached into his drawer and slid a small envelope across the desk. "This is not charity. It is my responsibility. It will cover your child's medical expenses and help you get back on your feet. And from today, consider this hospital open to you and to every poor soul who walks in. I will not turn anyone away again." Imran stared at the envelope, torn between pride and gratitude. He wanted to reject it, to prove that dignity was worth more than money. But then he thought of Ayesha, of little Aman, of the countless nights they had gone hungry. He thought of the baby's cries, of the prayers whispered in desperation. Perhaps sometimes accepting help was not weakness, but strength. He took the envelope with trembling hands. "Thank you, Dr. Sahib. May Allah guide you to never forget this lesson again." Tears welled in Dr. Kamal's eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. "It was your son who reminded me, not me." In the days that followed, the story spread through the town. People whispered in tea stalls and marketplaces about the poor couple whose child had forced the richest doctor to bow his head. Some scoffed, saying a leopard never changes its spots. Others, especially the poor who had once been turned away, felt a spark of hope. Perhaps now, they too would be treated with dignity. When Ayesha was finally strong enough to walk, she and Imran brought Aman home. Their tiny room had never felt so full. Neighbors came to see the miracle baby, some bringing small gifts of food or cloth. Ayesha held her son close, whispering promises of a brighter future. Imran, meanwhile, began to dream again. He looked for extra work, determined to give Aman the life he deserved. Every swing of the hammer, every load he carried was fueled by the memory of nearly losing his child and the vow that it would never happen again. And Dr. Kamal? His transformation did not end with Aman's survival. Slowly, he began to change his entire practice. The poor who once avoided his hospital out of fear now found the doors open. He established a small fund to cover treatment for those who could not pay, a fund he personally contributed to each month. But more than money, it was his attitude that changed. He listened when the poor spoke. He placed his hand gently on the shoulders of mothers who cried. He smiled at children who clutched their father's hands in fear. He became, slowly, the kind of doctor he once needed himself. Yet, in the quiet of the night, when the hospital halls were still, he often thought of Amon. The child's fragile cries haunted him, but in the sweetest way, as a reminder of the day he had been saved, not by his own skill, but by a poor man's faith and a newborn's breath. One evening, months later, Imran and Ayesha returned to the hospital for a routine checkup. Amon, now stronger and smiling, clung to his mother's shawl. When Dr. Kamal saw the child, his stern face softened completely. He reached out, and Amon, without hesitation, wrapped his tiny fingers around the doctor's hand. Tears filled the old man's eyes. "You will never know what you have done for me, little one," he whispered. And in that simple gesture, all wounds seemed to heal. The poor man's anger, the mother's suffering, and the doctor's guilt. Resolution had arrived, not in the form of money or status, but in the quiet miracle of a child who had been refused, yet had changed everything. The story of Ayesha, Imran, little Amon, and Dr. Kamal was more than just the tale of a poor family's struggle and a doctor's redemption. It became a mirror held up to the world, forcing everyone who heard it to ask themselves, what kind of person am I? The one who turns away, or the one who helps? Ayesha's suffering was not unique. Every day, across villages, towns, and cities, countless mothers walked into hospitals with hope trembling in their eyes, only to be told that without money, their lives did not matter. Every refusal left scars not just on their bodies, but on their souls. Yet this story proved that even the coldest hearts could be changed if only compassion was allowed to breathe. Imran's unwavering faith showed us the strength of love, the kind of love that does not collapse under humiliation, that does not surrender to despair. He was not a wealthy man, not a powerful man, but he was a father willing to beg, cry, and fight for his child. And in his desperation, he held a mirror up to a doctor who had forgotten what it meant to be human. Ayesha's courage, too, cannot be forgotten. In her weakest moment, when pain racked her body and hopelessness loomed, she still whispered words of faith. Her prayers became a shield around her child, carrying him through the valley of death and into life. She is a reminder that the strength of a mother is one of the most powerful forces on earth. And Amon, the child who entered the world unwanted by those in power, rejected before he could even take a breath, became the very key to unlocking a hardened heart. His fragile cries, his fight for life, became the sound that tore down walls of arrogance and replaced them with humility. Dr. Kamal's transformation, perhaps, is the most profound. He began as a man who saw patients not as souls, but as invoices, whose pride had blinded him to suffering. But by facing the mirror of his own conscience, by remembering his past pain, he rediscovered the meaning of his profession. He became proof that it is never too late to change, never too late to choose compassion over cruelty. This story teaches us that true humanity does not live in our wealth, our titles, or our rules. It lives in the way we treat the weakest among us. A society is not measured by how it serves the rich, but by how it protects the poor, the vulnerable, and the voiceless. Every child, whether born in a palace or in a crumbling slum, deserves a chance to live. Every mother deserves care, dignity, and compassion. And every doctor, every human being, carries a responsibility to see beyond money and status, and to recognize the sacred value of life itself. It is easy to walk past suffering, to convince ourselves that someone else will help, or that the poor deserve their fate. But this story demands that we stop and ask, if it were my child, my spouse, my parent, what would I pray for in that moment? And if I can give that to someone else, why would I not? To every viewer listening today, let this not just be a story you forget when the video ends. Let it be a seed planted in your heart. The next time you see someone in need, do not look away. Do not measure their worth in currency. Instead, measure your own worth in compassion. If you're a doctor, nurse, or healer, remember the oath you once swore. Lives are not commodities. Your greatest legacy will not be in the money you earn, but in the lives you save. If you're a leader or someone in power, remember that rules without mercy are cruelty disguised as order. Change begins with you. And if you are an ordinary person, like Imran and Ayesha, never underestimate the power of faith, love, and perseverance. Sometimes, even the smallest act of courage can change the course of history. Aman's cry was small, but moved mountains. Your kindness may feel small, but you never know. It may save a life, change a heart, or rewrite someone's entire future. So let this story be a reminder, an awakening. Don't wait for tragedy to teach you compassion. Choose it now, because in the end, the world does not remember how much we had, but how much we gave.